Have you ever stepped into a moment and felt your entire body go silent? As if something inside you recognized it before your mind could explain why the room may have been ordinary. The conversation may have been simple. The person in front of you may have said nothing unusual, yet a strange certainty moved through you. Quiet, but undeniable. Whispering. I have already lived this, not in a memory you could prove, not in a dream you could fully remember, but in a deeper place, beyond logic, where time seemed to fold back on itself and touch the present from the other side. That feeling is easy to dismiss because the world has trained you to trust only what arrives through the five senses. If something cannot be measured immediately, people call it imagination. If something cannot be explained quickly, they call it coincidence. But what if the moment was not random? What if your brain was not malfunctioning, but receiving a signal from a possible future that had come close enough for your nervous system to feel it first? What if déjà vu is sometimes more than a glitch? What if it is a ripple from a timeline brushing against the edge of your awareness before your physical life has caught up? You are not here by accident. And this title did not pull you in by chance. Some part of you already understands that memory is not always locked behind you. Sometimes memory behaves like an echo. Sometimes it rises from the direction of becoming, not from the ruins of what has been. This is why a place you have never visited can feel strangely intimate. This is why a sentence someone speaks for the first time can land inside you like an answer you have been carrying for years. This is why certain dreams do not fade like dreams, but wait inside you until reality builds the scene around them. Your brain is not merely a warehouse of old images. It is a living receiver, a quantum mirror reflecting not only what has happened, but what your consciousness is beginning to sense as possible. In every moment, you stand inside an ocean of probabilities. Most people think the future is a fixed hallway waiting ahead, but the deeper truth is more alive than that. The future is responsive. It listens to attention. It bends around identity. It grows stronger when you feed it with emotion, expectation, and repeated inner vision. This is where the observer effect stops being an abstract idea and becomes intimate, personal, and impossible to ignore. The thing you keep observing does not remain untouched by you. Your attention is not passive. It is a quantum spotlight. When you shine it on fear long enough, fear begins to look like evidence. When you shine it on rejection long enough, every silence starts to sound like abandonment. When you shine it on the same painful outcome, your body prepares for that outcome as if it has already chosen it. And then, without realizing it, you begin walking toward the very future you thought you were only afraid of. This is the hidden danger of remembering tomorrow unconsciously. But listen carefully, this is not a message of blame. This is not here to tell you that every wound was your fault, or that every loss was created by one thought. Pain is complex. Life is layered. Other people have choices. And the world has weight. The real message is power returning to the place where you forgot you had any. If your awareness can feed an old future, your awareness can also withdraw from it. If your fear has been rehearsing a timeline, your coherence can begin dissolving it. If your brain has been remembering limitation, your soul can remember liberation. So stay with me, because this is where the key begins to turn. The future you sense is not always the future you must enter. Sometimes it is a warning. Sometimes it is an invitation. Sometimes it is an old pattern asking whether you will finally stop giving it your name. The observer inside you decides what happens next, not by forcing reality, but by becoming conscious enough to stop collapsing into the same identity. That is why this video is not about predicting your destiny. It is about remembering that destiny responds when the observer awakens. In this transmission, you will learn why your brain may remember a future that has not happened yet, how the observer effect turns attention into creative power, and how to stop feeding the timeline that no longer deserves your life. Take one breath now. Let the old fear loosen. The memory from tomorrow is not here to trap you. It is here to wake you. Now that you have felt the door open, begin here. Your brain is not only a machine that stores what happened yesterday. It is not merely a library of old faces, old wounds, old rooms, old voices. and old endings. That is the version of the brain most people were taught to believe in. Because it feels safe, solid, and easy to explain. But you have already experienced moments that do not fit inside that small explanation. You have felt a memory arrive before the event. You have recognized a scene before life gave you any reason to recognize it. And that recognition matters. Because consciousness does not move through time the way the ordinary mind imagines. The ordinary mind thinks time is a straight road past behind you, present under your feet, future waiting far ahead. But your deeper awareness does not always obey that line. It sometimes feels in spirals. It sometimes receives in fragments. It sometimes touches a possibility before your physical life reaches it. This is why a simple moment can suddenly feel ancient. This is why a stranger can feel familiar. This is why a place you have never entered can feel like a room your soul already knows. Think of your brain as a quantum mirror. A normal mirror only reflects what is standing in front of it. But a quantum mirror reflects what your consciousness is close enough to touch. It reflects impressions from the past. Yes, but it may also reflect probabilities forming around you. These impressions do not always arrive as clear visions. More often, they arrive as emotion, pressure, recognition, timing, and an almost silent inner knowing. You may not see the future like a movie. You may feel it like a temperature change inside your body before the outer world reveals what it means. That is why déjà vu can feel so strange. People often describe it as if the mind simply misplaced a memory, as if the brain accidentally placed a new event inside an old folder. And sometimes, perhaps, that is all it is. But you know the difference between a passing glitch and a moment that shakes your entire inner field. Some déjà vu disappears in seconds, other déjà vu follows you. It leaves a mark. It feels charged. It feels precise. It makes you pause because something in the scene does not feel merely familiar. It feels connected to a path. This is where the idea of a neural echo becomes powerful. A neural echo is not a fixed prediction. It is not the universe handing you a sealed script and saying, "This must happen." It is more subtle than that. It is a vibration from a possible timeline touching your nervous system before the physical event fully arrives. Your brain receives the echo, but your consciousness interprets it. If you interpret it with fear, it may become a warning. If you interpret it with coherence, it may become guidance. The echo is not the destination. It is a signal, and signals require awareness. Imagine walking through life with invisible radio waves all around you. You cannot see them. Yet if the receiver is tuned correctly, sound appears. Your brain works in a similar way with certain patterns of reality. When your awareness becomes sensitive, it begins picking up signals from possibilities that are already forming in your field. This is not about escaping the present. It is about understanding that the present is wider than you were told. The present is not a thin line. It is the meeting point where past memory and future probability begin speaking. You may have felt this before making an important decision, before the phone call came, before the relationship shifted, before you moved, left, returned, ended something, or began again. There was a feeling first, a quiet pressure, a strange inner preview. Maybe you ignored it because you could not explain it. Maybe later, when the event happened, you remembered that your body had known something before your mind did. That is not weakness. That is not confusion. That is the first sign that your awareness is becoming more sensitive to the timelines gathering around your choices every single day. But sensitivity without clarity can become overwhelming. This is why many awakened people start to fear their own intuition. They feel something before it happens, then assume every feeling is a prophecy. They sense a possible future, then begin watching it with anxiety until the body treats it as unavoidable. That is where the observer must mature. Not every future you feel is meant to be followed. Not every image deserves your belief. Not every inner signal is a command. Some are invitations. Some are warnings. Some are reflections of the old self, trying to keep its familiar world alive. So when your brain seems to remember a future, ask a deeper question. Do not ask, "Is this guaranteed?" Ask, "What part of me is recognizing this?" Is it your fear, Recognizing a pattern it has survived before? Is it your old identity expecting the same wound in a new disguise? Or is it your higher awareness sensing a doorway that feels peaceful, expansive, and quietly inevitable? This question changes everything, because it moves you from passive receiver to conscious observer. You stop treating the future like a sentence. You start treating it like a field of participation. This is the first awakening sign, the moment you realize recognition is not the same as surrender. Just because something feels familiar does not mean you must repeat it. Just because your nervous system has seen a pattern before does not mean your soul has agreed to live it again. The old future may knock through déjà vu, dreams, or sudden knowing, but you are allowed to pause at the threshold. You are allowed to breathe before responding. You are allowed to choose whether this signal belongs to the life you are leaving or the life you are entering. And once you understand this, the fear begins to loosen. Your brain is not broken. Your awareness is opening. Your memories are not limited to what has already happened. Because consciousness is beginning to sense the movement of what could happen next. The question is not whether a future can call you. The question is whether you will answer as the old observer or the awakened one. Because the same signal can become a loop or a doorway, depending on who you are when you notice it. And what you notice next begins to strengthen. Now that you understand, your brain may sense possible futures before they become physical. The next truth is this: what you notice does not stay neutral. Attention is not an empty beam passing over reality. It is participation. It is contact. It is a silent agreement between your consciousness and the field of possibilities around you. The moment you begin watching something with emotion, you begin strengthening your relationship with it. This is why the observer effect matters so deeply. It is not only about particles in a laboratory. It is about the way your inner world selects which future feels close, believable, and ready to form. Most people think they are simply noticing what is already there. They say, "I am just being realistic. I am just preparing. I am just protecting myself." But underneath those words, their nervous system may be staring at one unwanted possibility until it becomes the loudest option in the room. They replay the rejection before it happens. They rehearse the failure before the attempt. They imagine the loss before love has even arrived. And because the body does not always know the difference between a repeated inner scene and an outer event, it begins preparing for the feared future as if it has already received an invitation. This is how fear becomes an unconscious observer. Fear watches the wrong future with devotion. It checks for evidence. It scans faces, delays, silences, messages, patterns, and tiny changes in energy. It says, "See, something bad is coming." And then it teaches your body to contract before anything has actually happened. The contraction changes your choices. Your choices change your direction. Your direction changes the reality you meet. Slowly, the future you feared begins to look less like imagination and more like destiny. Not because it was fixed, but because it was fed by repeated attention and emotional charge. This does not mean your thoughts control every person or every event. That would be a shallow and cruel misunderstanding. Life includes other wills, histories, timing, systems, wounds, and mysteries you cannot reduce to one sentence. The power here is more precise than blame. It says that your observation changes your posture toward reality. It changes what you expect, what you tolerate, what you miss, what you chase, what you avoid, and what you unconsciously keep alive. When you observe through the old self, you do not just see the old world, you begin cooperating with it again. Imagine your attention as a quantum spotlight. Wherever it rests long enough, details become sharper, meaning thickens, emotion gathers, the possibility begins to glow. If you shine that spotlight on the fear that someone will leave, every delayed reply starts to feel like proof. If you shine it on the belief that you are always behind, every success around you becomes evidence of failure. If you shine it on the memory of being overlooked, even neutral moments can feel like rejection. The spotlight does not create everything from nothing. but it decides what your consciousness keeps feeding with presence, and presence is creative. You already know this from ordinary life. A problem grows heavier when you stare at it without breath. A possibility grows stronger when you return to it with calm consistency. A fear becomes more persuasive when you feed it images at midnight. A vision becomes more believable when you practice feeling worthy of it before it arrives. The quantum field of your life responds less to words you say once, and more to states you inhabit repeatedly. This is why observation is not a thought floating through your head. It is an identity you wear while looking. So when a future memory appears, do not immediately worship it as prophecy. Notice how you are observing it. Are you watching with panic? Trying to prevent pain by mentally living inside it. First, are you watching with resentment? Assuming life will betray you because it once did. Are you watching with longing, but still believing the desired timeline belongs to someone more chosen than you, or are you watching with coherence, allowing the possible future to feel near without gripping it into distortion? The same image can become medicine or poison, depending on the observer behind the gaze. This is especially important when the future memory carries fear. A heavy image may not be destiny. It may be a warning light on the dashboard of consciousness. It may be showing you where an old timeline is still available, because an old identity is still active. The purpose is not to make you panic. The purpose is to help you interrupt the collapse. When you feel the old future rising, pause. Do not argue with it. Do not dramatize it. Do not kneel before it. Simply recognize it as a possibility, asking for your attention, and choose whether it deserves more of you. This pause is the beginning of freedom. Between the signal and your reaction, there is a small, sacred space where the observer can awaken. In that space, you are no longer the frightened self, rehearsing the same ending. You are no longer the abandoned self, searching for signs of abandonment. You are no longer the disappointed self, expecting disappointment as proof of wisdom. You become the witness who can say, I see this timeline, but I do not have to feed it. That sentence may seem simple, but spoken from the body, it removes energy from the loop. Then something subtle begins to shift. Your attention becomes cleaner. Your nervous system stops treating every inner image as an emergency. Your body begins to learn that sensitivity is not danger. You can feel a possible future without surrendering authority to it. You can notice a fear without turning it into a shrine. You can sense an invitation without forcing it into obsession. This is mature observation. The observer does not deny reality. The observer stops giving creative power to the version of reality that keeps shrinking the soul. And this is where the next layer opens. If what you notice begins to strengthen, then the question is not only, what future do I want? The deeper question is, what future am I already feeding with my attention? Because your life may not be repeating because you are cursed. It may be repeating because the old observer keeps searching for the old evidence. And every search keeps the old pathway warm. But once you see this, the loop can no longer hide in the dark. You can redirect the spotlight. You can bring breath where panic used to rule. You can bring coherence where fear used to decide. And the moment your observation changes, the field around you begins to reorganize. This is why the next truth matters. The same future can return in many disguises until you finally observe it differently and consciously refuse to strengthen it again. After you begin to see attention as a quantum spotlight, another pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The same future keeps finding you in different disguises. It may not arrive with the same face, the same room, or the same exact situation, but the emotional shape feels identical. Different people, same wound, different opportunities, same hesitation, different season, same fear that you will be left behind. This is not because life is trying to punish you. It is because consciousness repeats what has not yet been observed from a new level of identity. The future returns until the observer changes position, language, and frequency. Think of this as the invisible script beneath your timeline. You may believe you are making fresh choices, but the old self can be reading from a page you never remember writing. It tells you what love means. It tells you how success is supposed to feel. It tells you when to trust, when to withdraw, when to expect disappointment, and when to sabotage peace before peace becomes unfamiliar. The script is not always made of thoughts. Sometimes it is made of body memory, inherited fear, unfinished grief, and decisions you made when you were too young to know you were making laws for your future. This is why you can leave one place and recreate the same emotional weather somewhere else. You can change cities, change jobs, change relationships, change your appearance, change your routines, and still meet the same inner outcome because the observer inside you has not changed what it expects reality to confirm. The world becomes a holographic glass. You think you are looking out at new scenes, but through every surface. An old projection is still shining. Until you notice the projection, you will keep calling the reflection fate. You will say, "This always happens to me," without realizing the phrase itself is part of the spell. The loop often begins with a future memory, or a familiar feeling, that appears before the event. A person enters your life, and something in you says, "I know this ending." A chance appears, and something says, "This will disappear." A silence happens, and something says, "Here comes abandonment again." The old observer does not wait for facts. It rushes ahead and uses the past to name the future. Then your body contracts. Your voice changes. Your choices narrow. And you begin responding to what you believe is coming instead of what is actually here. In that moment, the timeline has already begun to bend. This is why déjà vu can be a doorway or a trap. When a scene feels familiar, it gives you a sacred pause. It is as if consciousness places a hand on your shoulder and whispers, "Notice this carefully." But the old self mistakes recognition for inevitability. It thinks, "I have seen this before, so I know how it ends." The awakened observer asks a different question. Have I seen this before so I can finally choose differently? That question breaks the spell. It turns déjà vu from a prison bell into a timeline intersection. It reminds you that familiarity is not a command. It is a choice point. You may meet the same future through relationships. The faces change, but the energetic lesson returns. One person may withdraw. Another may overpromise. Another may mirror the exact place where you still do not choose yourself. The surface story looks different. So the mind argues, "This is new," but the body feels the same tightening, the same waiting, the same urge to prove your worth. This is not evidence that you are doomed in love. It is evidence that your consciousness is being shown the precise place where the old observer still hands authority to fear, longing, or unhealed attachment. You may meet the same future through work. A new opportunity opens. But the old script says, "You are not ready." A larger version of life appears. But the nervous system calls expansion, danger. You delay, shrink, overthink, or wait for perfect certainty until the door begins to close. Then the mind says, "See, it was not meant for me." But the deeper truth is that the future did not reject you. The identity that would have entered it was not yet coherent enough to remain. The opportunity was not only testing your skill, it was testing which observer would answer the call. You may even meet the same future through your own inner life. You wake with a heavy feeling and assume the day has already chosen its direction. You have a dream and treat it as a sentence. You sense tension and begin searching for proof that something is wrong. This is how the old timeline uses your sensitivity against you. It does not need to trap you with obvious chains. It only needs to make you confuse intuition with fear. True intuition is usually clean, quiet, and spacious. Fear is repetitive, urgent, and hungry. It needs your attention again and again to survive. When you feel the repetition, do not shame yourself. Shame is just another doorway back into the old script. Instead, treat the recurrence as a signal. Something is asking to be seen from a higher place. Put one breath between the old feeling and the next action. Let the breath become a small break in the timeline. Ask, what future am I about to recreate if I respond from this state? Then ask, what future becomes available if I observe this without becoming it? These two questions create distance. And distance gives consciousness room to choose. This pause may seem small, but the old timeline survives through speed. It needs you to react before awareness arrives. It needs the instant text, the defensive tone, the familiar withdrawal, the silent resentment, the desperate chase, the self-protective no when your soul was whispering yes. It needs the body to repeat before the heart can remember freedom. When you slow down, you interrupt the automatic collapse. You become less available to the invisible script. You stop giving the same future your hands, your voice, your posture, and your belief. The loop begins losing the actor it depended on. From there, the pattern may still appear, but it will not feel the same. This is an important sign of awakening. The outer situation may look familiar, but your inner relationship to it changes. You may still notice the delayed reply, the uncertain opportunity, the memory of an old wound. But you no longer collapse immediately into the identity that expects defeat. You can say, I recognize this weather, but I am not the same sky. That is when the future starts responding differently, not because you controlled every detail, but because you stopped offering the same frequency to the same doorway. And this prepares you for the shock hidden beneath every repeated pattern. The future you keep meeting may not be chasing you. It may be waiting for you to stop feeding the version of yourself that knows how to recreate it. Once you see the script, you cannot unsee it. The next question is liberating. What if the future you remember is the future you keep quietly strengthening? Now we arrive at the hidden point beneath everything you have felt so far. The repeated future is not merely returning because the universe wants to test you. It is returning because something inside you may still be feeding the version of reality you secretly want to escape. This is the truth most people avoid, because it removes the comfort of blaming fate without placing you inside shame. The future you remember may not be a prophecy carved into time. It may be a probability strengthened every time your fear, attention, and identity gather around it and call it real. Look at how this happens in the smallest ways. You sense an ending before anything has ended, and immediately your body prepares for loss. You feel a delay, and the old story says, here it comes again. You remember a future where you are disappointed, abandoned, or unseen, and instead of pausing, you begin rehearsing it as if rehearsal will protect you. But rehearsal is not neutral. It gives the timeline texture. It gives it breath. It gives it your posture, your tone, your decisions, your silence, your suspicion. Soon, the imagined future begins borrowing your life from you daily. The old self is addicted to familiar outcomes, even when those outcomes hurt. Familiar pain can feel safer than unknown freedom because the nervous system knows how to survive it. It knows the script, the collapse, the recovery, the explanation. It knows who to become when disappointment arrives, but it does not know who to be when life opens. This is why people sabotage peace, distrust, love, delay expansion, and call it intuition. They are not always following wisdom. Sometimes they are protecting the only identity they have practiced long enough to call normal, even if normal keeps them small. This is the shock: the future is not fixed until you become fixed. A possibility may approach you, but it needs a compatible observer to enter through. It needs the version of you who still believes rejection is inevitable. Scarcity is permanent. Love must be earned. Success must be delayed. Or, freedom must come with punishment. When that version of you takes the wheel, the field recognizes the match. The old future does not need to force you. It simply waits for the old identity to stand in the doorway and say, through emotion and action, I am available again. This is why fighting a feared future rarely frees you. Fighting keeps your eyes on it. It keeps your breath wrapped around it. It keeps your emotional body negotiating with the very image you say you want to leave. The deeper shift is not to panic harder, visualize harder, or convince the universe harder. The deeper shift is to remove your identity from the outcome. You stop being the one who expects that ending. You stop being the one who prepares for that wound. You stop being the one who calls contraction realistic and calls expansion dangerous inside your body. The observer loop is subtle. First, you sense a possible future. Then fear gives it meaning. Then attention returns to it again and again. Then the body adjusts to survive it. Then your choices become smaller, tighter, more defensive. Then the world reflects the posture you have been practicing. Finally, the event arrives in some form, and the mind says, I knew it. But what if you did not know it because it was destined? What if you knew it because you had been carrying its emotional blueprint before it appeared? That realization is not condemnation. It is awakening itself. And awakening always begins with seeing the mechanism without hating yourself for having lived inside it. You were not foolish for expecting pain after pain trained you. You were not weak for scanning the horizon after storms kept arriving. You were not broken for mistaking vigilance for wisdom. The old self was trying to protect you with the only tools it had. But protection becomes prison when it keeps you loyal to the very future you are ready to outgrow. At some point, consciousness must say, thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I am no longer yours. This is the moment the old timeline begins to lose its authority, not because it disappears instantly, but because you stop bowing when it appears. The image may still come, the fear may still knock, the future memory may still flash across your inner screen, but now you understand that recognition does not require surrender. A timeline can call your name without owning your body. A possibility can feel familiar without being chosen. A fear can speak loudly without becoming truth. You are allowed to witness the old future and refuse to become the observer it was designed to use. This is where the observer effect becomes a spiritual responsibility. You are not asked to deny what you feel. You are asked to stop worshiping every feeling as fate. You are not asked to pretend fear is not present. You are asked to stop placing fear on the throne of your perception. You are not asked to control reality through force. You are asked to become coherent enough that reality no longer receives mixed signals from your scattered identity. The field listens less to what you want for 5 minutes and more to who you repeatedly become when pressure arrives. So ask yourself with honesty, who are you when the future memory appears? Are you the abandoned child trying to predict another leaving? Are you the disappointed dreamer trying to avoid another closed door? Are you the unchosen version of yourself searching for proof that life still refuses you? Or are you the awakened observer who can feel the echo, breathe through the charge, and say, this may be a possibility, but I will not feed it with my identity? That sentence changes the entire architecture of the moment because it separates awareness from automatic collapse and gives power back. When you separate awareness from collapse, you create a new future by refusing to perform the old one. This is not passive. It is one of the radical acts of consciousness. You may still feel the familiar pull, but you do not obey it. You may still hear the old prediction, but you do not build a home inside it. You may still sense the painful possibility, but you do not decorate it with your imagination. Instead, you return to the body, soften the jaw, open the breath, and become available to a timeline that requires peace instead of panic. This is why the future is not fixed until you become fixed. When your identity hardens around fear, the future has fewer ways to reach you. When your identity hardens around betrayal, every road begins to resemble betrayal. When your identity hardens around delay, even open doors feel suspicious. But when identity becomes fluid, when you stop saying, this is just who I am, and begin saying, this is a pattern I can observe, the future gains new entrances. Reality may not transform like lightning every time, but it begins losing the old instructions you kept transmitting through your body. The shock is not meant to scare you. It is meant to sober you into freedom. If the old future has been fed, it can also be unfed. If the old pattern has been rehearsed, it can also be interrupted. If the old identity has been practiced, it can also be retired. The power was never in forcing the universe to obey your desire. The power was in becoming unavailable to the version of yourself who kept choosing from fear and calling the result destiny. You do not have to defeat the future. You have to stop consenting unconsciously now. And when you stop consenting, a strange quiet arrives, not because everything outside has changed, but because the inner contract has been broken. The old image may still appear, but it no longer feels like a command. The fear may still speak, but it no longer sounds like God. The pattern may still knock, but it no longer finds the same person waiting at the door. This is the hidden quantum shift. The timeline loses its observer. It cannot become real in the same way because the identity that used to complete the circuit is no longer participating with it. From here, the path softens. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to monitor every thought. You do not need to fear fear. You only need to remember, again and again, that the future responds to the observer you embody most consistently. The future you remember may have been the future you kept feeding, but this also means another future can begin when you withdraw your light from the old one, and this prepares you for the next doorway. Learning whether a future memory comes from fear or from your higher timeline, calling you home now. After the shock of realizing that an old future can be fed by an old identity, your next task is not to become afraid of every signal. Your next task is discernment. Because not every future memory comes from fear. Not every sudden knowing is a trap. Not every déjà vu is the old timeline trying to pull you backward. Some moments of recognition are invitations from the version of life that is waiting for you to become coherent enough to enter it. This is where the body becomes important, because the body often knows the difference before the mind can explain it. A fear-based future memory usually feels urgent, tight, and hungry. It does not simply inform you. It demands that you react. It makes you scan, grip, chase, defend, predict, or prepare for pain before pain has arrived. Your chest may contract. Your stomach may harden. Your breath may climb into the throat. The image may repeat like a warning siren, not because it is sacred truth, but because fear needs repetition to feel powerful. It says, look again, check again, protect yourself again, and every time you obey, the old timeline receives more of your life force. A higher timeline memory feels different. It can be intense, but it is not frantic. It can move you deeply, but it does not threaten you. It does not scream, hurry, or punish. It carries a quiet certainty, like a door glowing at the end of a dark hallway. You may feel emotional, but beneath the emotion there is space. You may feel called, but not controlled. You may feel a strange recognition, but instead of shrinking, something in you softens, opens, and remembers. This is not danger. This is direction. That one sentence can save you from confusing anxiety with intuition. Anxiety rushes ahead because it distrusts the present. Intuition arrives clean because it does not need drama to be heard. Anxiety keeps asking for more evidence, more signs, more reassurance, more control. Intuition gives a clear impression and then leaves room for your choice. Fear makes you smaller before the future even arrives. Guidance makes you more present, more honest, and more aligned. So when a future memory appears, do not only ask what you saw, ask what state it placed you in. Your state is the language of the timeline. A fear-based signal pulls you into survival. A higher signal pulls you into coherence. Coherence does not mean everything feels easy. It means your inner pieces begin facing the same direction. Your breath, your heart, your attention, and your choice start to gather around the same truth. There is less inner argument, less desperate negotiation, less need to force the outcome. You begin to feel that the future is not something you must chase from lack, but something you must meet from wholeness. This is why higher timeline memories often arrive with peace, not passive peace, not the kind that makes you numb, but a living peace that steadies you. It may come through a dream where you are standing in a place you have not yet reached, yet you wake with tears because it felt more real than your fear. It may come through a sudden image of yourself speaking, creating, loving, leaving, healing, or rising. You cannot prove it. But the body says yes with a calm that does not need applause. Pay attention to the time ripples around these memories. A time ripple is not a command. It is a gentle recurrence that keeps pointing without pushing. You hear the same phrase from different mouths. You see the same symbol in unrelated places. A book opens to the line you needed. A stranger names the exact thing you have been quietly feeling. A dream returns. Not to scare you, but to deepen your recognition. These ripples are not proof that you should abandon discernment. They are invitations to become more awake inside the moment. The old timeline uses repetition to imprison you. The higher timeline uses repetition to remind you. The difference is in the aftertaste. After an old timeline signal, you feel contracted, urgent, suspicious, or doomed. After a higher timeline signal, you may feel vulnerable, but also clearer. You may feel challenged, but not condemned. You may feel stretched, but not erased. Something in you stands taller, even if you are afraid. The signal does not demand that you betray yourself. It asks you to become more truly yourself than you have ever allowed. This is the hidden key: emotional coherence. You do not enter the higher future by obsessively thinking about it. You enter by becoming internally compatible with it. If the future you remember is built from freedom, but your present identity is built from panic, the bridge becomes unstable. If the future you sense requires trust, but your body keeps choosing suspicion, the signal becomes distorted. Coherence is the practice of teaching your system to hold the frequency of the future without turning it into need, pressure, or fear. That means you stop asking the future to rescue you from the present, and you begin embodying the qualities that future would require now. If you sense a future where you are loved, practice no longer abandoning yourself today. If you sense a future where your voice is heard, speak one honest sentence today. If you sense a future where your life is peaceful, remove one unnecessary agreement with chaos today. These are not small acts. They are physical proofs that the observer has changed. They tell the field, I am no longer waiting to become available. When you practice coherence, the higher future stops feeling distant. It becomes less like a fantasy and more like a familiar room your soul is learning to enter without flinching. You may still have doubts. You may still feel old fear at the edge of the door. But fear no longer gets to decide the meaning of the signal. You can say, I feel the old contraction, but I choose the future that expands me. This is how recognition becomes participation. This is how a future memory turns into a living path. Before you move into the practice, remember this: the higher timeline does not need you to panic your way toward it. It needs you to become steady enough to recognize it without distortion. It needs the observer who can feel a signal, breathe, and ask, does this make me smaller? Or does this call me higher? That question is a doorway. The old future collapses through fear. The higher future anchors through coherence. And once you can tell the difference in your body, you are no longer trapped inside every image your mind produces. You begin choosing which future deserves your attention, and which one must finally be released before the next breath gives the old timeline permission again. Now that you can feel the difference between fear and a higher timeline, the next step is practice, not theory, not endless analysis, not waiting for another sign to give you permission. Practice is where the observer becomes real in the body. Because if the old future has been fed through repeated attention, it must be released through repeated interruption. You do not break a timeline by arguing with it. You break it by no longer becoming the person who completes its circuit. The moment the old memory rises, your work is simple: pause, breathe, and refuse to obey panic. Begin with the 3-breath collapse practice. When a future memory appears, especially one that feels heavy, do not chase it and do not fight it. Place both feet on the floor if you can. Let your shoulders drop. Inhale slowly and say inside, I see the old timeline. Exhale and say, I no longer feed it. Inhale again and feel the image lose its authority. Exhale again and let your body know it is safe to stay present. On the 3rd breath, whisper, I choose the future that frees me now, then remain still long enough to feel choice. This practice works because the old timeline survives through speed. It wants your reaction before awareness enters the room. It wants the sudden message, the anxious check, the defensive tone, the familiar apology, the withdrawal, the chase, the collapse, the silent resentment. It wants you moving faster than your soul. Breath interrupts that spell. Breath tells the nervous system, this is not an emergency. This is a choice point. In that tiny space, the observer steps forward. You are no longer inside the prediction. You are watching the prediction. And what you can watch. You can release today with love. After the breath, write the old script. Do not make it beautiful. Do not make it spiritual. Make it honest. Take a piece of paper and write one sentence. This is the future I no longer choose. Then name it beneath that sentence. I no longer choose abandonment. I no longer choose shrinking. I no longer choose being unseen. I no longer choose delaying my life until fear feels comfortable. When you write it, you pull the invisible script out of the body and place it where your conscious awareness can finally see it clearly without becoming it again today. Then tear the paper. Not with hatred, but with completion. You are not attacking the old self. You are ending the agreement that made the old self your only narrator. As the paper opens, imagine the timeline losing access to your emotional charge. Imagine the future memory becoming smoke instead of command. Imagine the observer stepping back from the screen and realizing, I do not have to keep watching this movie. The ritual is simple because the body understands symbols. It understands endings. It understands sound, movement, breath, and physical proof better than spiritual concepts alone can ever explain fully. Now place your hand on your chest. This is where the practice becomes tender. The goal is not to force a new reality with pressure. The goal is to become coherent with the future that does not require fear to lead you. Feel your palm against your heart and say, quietly, I am coherent with the future that frees me. Do not perform it. Do not shout it at the universe. Let it land in the cells. Let the nervous system hear that you are no longer using anxiety as proof of devotion to your destiny or your highest timeline. Coherence is not a mood you pretend to have. It is an inner alignment you practice until the body stops arguing with the soul. If your future requires courage, take one honest action. If your future requires peace, remove one source of unnecessary chaos. If your future requires self-respect, do not answer the old invitation that always costs you your dignity. This is how the new observer becomes believable. You give the body evidence. You show reality that your declaration is not decoration. It has become behavior. And behavior is where a timeline begins to anchor here, inside matter today. Do one small physical act from the future self before the day ends. Clean the corner that has been holding stagnant energy. Send the message your higher self would send without begging. Drink water, as if your body deserves care. Open the document. Make the call. Leave the conversation. Say no without explaining your entire soul. Say yes without waiting for fear to approve. The act does not need to look dramatic. It only needs to be sincere. A new future does not ask for theater first. It asks for evidence that you are available now in this moment fully. This is where many people misunderstand quantum shifting. They wait for the entire universe to change before they change posture. But the posture is the portal. The voice is the portal. The breath is the portal. The boundary is the portal. The small act is the portal. When you behave as the observer of the new timeline, you stop asking the old timeline to give you permission to leave. You leave through embodiment. You leave by withdrawing attention, removing consent, and placing your energy where the freer future can recognize you as compatible with its pattern again and again now. There will be moments when the old future returns after the practice. Do not call this failure. A timeline can echo even after you stop choosing it. The mind may say, nothing changed. The body may reach for the old reaction. The pattern may test whether you are serious. Smile gently at that moment. Not because it is easy, but because you now know what is happening. The old future is checking for the old observer. It is knocking on a door that used to open automatically. This time, Breathe before you answer, and choose differently again with full presence. This is how you stop remembering the old future. Not by erasing every image, not by controlling every thought, not by becoming afraid of sensitivity, but by refusing to feed what no longer deserves your life force. You breathe, you write, you tear, you place your hand on your heart, you act from the freer self before the outer world confirms the shift. And slowly, the future memory changes texture. It stops feeling like a sentence and starts becoming a doorway, because the future does not need the old you, it needs the observer awakening now inside your body first. After the practice, something larger begins to reveal itself. You are not chasing the future alone. The future is also reaching for you. Every time you stop feeding the old timeline, you create space for a different possibility to recognize you. It is as if a door has always been glowing ahead. But the old observer kept standing with its back turned, staring at the corridor of yesterday. Now, with one breath, one interruption, one honest act, your body turns toward the light. And the strangest part is this: the higher future does not feel foreign when you finally face it. It feels ancient. It feels remembered. It feels like a place inside time that has been waiting for your permission to arrive. This is why certain future memories feel so emotional. They are not always pictures of events. Sometimes they are memories of your own becoming. You are not only seeing a house, a person, a calling, a healing, or a breakthrough. You are sensing the version of you who could live there without shrinking. That is why the vision touches you so deeply. The future is not showing you only what might happen. It is showing you who you must become to meet it without losing yourself. And if the old future was built from fear, this higher future is built from recognition. It does not ask you to beg. It asks you to remember. I belong here. There is a part of you that has already touched this timeline in consciousness. Maybe you felt it in a dream where your life was peaceful, and waking up felt almost painful because ordinary reality seemed too small afterward. Maybe you felt it during a moment of silence when, for no logical reason, you knew you were not meant to stay where you are. Maybe you felt it when a future version of yourself appeared in your mind, not as fantasy, but as a living presence. This is not escapism. Escapism makes you abandon the present. True future recognition makes you more responsible inside the present because you realize every choice is either feeding the old road or opening the new one. And this recognition is not happening only to you. Across the collective field, more people are beginning to feel that time is changing texture. They feel dreams becoming louder, synchronicities becoming sharper, old identities becoming unbearable, conversations repeating until someone finally refuses the script. This is not random spiritual restlessness. It is collective consciousness, beginning to outgrow the timeline of unconscious repetition. Humanity is not awakening through comfort alone. It is awakening through pressure, pattern, memory, and the unbearable feeling that the old way of living cannot hold the soul anymore. When one person feels the future calling, it may seem personal. When millions feel it at once, it becomes a field event, a shared threshold. This is where morphic resonance becomes a sacred image for what you are living. Imagine an ocean of possibilities, and every awakened choice sends a ripple across the surface. One person chooses healing instead of revenge, and a ripple moves. One person chooses truth instead of performance, and a ripple moves. One person stops feeding the old future of fear, and somewhere, another heart feels permission to do the same. You may think your private shift belongs only to you, but consciousness is never isolated. Your nervous system, your breath, your attention, your refusal to repeat pain, all of it speaks into the field. Your freedom becomes information. Your coherence becomes signal. This means your future memory may be part of something larger than personal destiny. The version of you that keeps calling from ahead may not be calling only for your happiness, though your happiness matters. It may be calling because your shift becomes evidence for others. When you stop living from the old wound, someone near you senses a new possibility without knowing why. When you choose differently in a familiar moment, you break an inherited rhythm. When you embody peace where panic used to rule, you become a living contradiction to the old timeline. People may not understand what changed in you, but their field feels it. Your recognition becomes permission. This is why you must not underestimate small awakenings. A breath can become a threshold. A boundary can become a timeline shift. A single sentence spoken from the new observer can end years of invisible repetition. You may think nothing dramatic happened because the sky did not split open. But reality often changes first through subtle reorganizations. The text you do not send, the fear you do not obey, the old role you do not perform, the intuitive yes you finally honor. These are quiet earthquakes inside the field. The old future depends on your predictability. The higher future begins when you become unavailable to the version of you the old pattern was expecting. And when you become unavailable, the future has to meet a different observer. This is where hope becomes practical. Hope is not passive waiting. Hope is the discipline of aligning your attention with the timeline that frees you before it has fully appeared. Hope is saying, I can feel fear, but fear is not my oracle. Hope is saying, I can recognize the old future, but I do not have to become its doorway. Hope is saying, I will give my body evidence of the life I claim to be entering. The higher future does not need your perfection. It needs your participation. It needs your willingness to choose again while still trembling. So if you have been sensing a future that feels peaceful, expansive, strange, and familiar all at once, do not dismiss it. Do not reduce it to fantasy just because your current reality has not caught up yet. The soul often recognizes the destination before the life has built the road. That is why the gap can feel painful. You are standing between what has been and what is already calling. But the gap is not punishment. It is the bridge where embodiment is formed. Every day you cross a little more by choosing the state, the action, the word, the boundary, and the breath that match the future you say you remember. And now the message becomes simple. You are not here to fear the future. You are here to recognize which future is worthy of your observation. You are here to withdraw your light from the old corridor and place it on the doorway that expands your life. You are here to become so coherent with your higher timeline that the old one can no longer find the observer it used to use. Your future is waiting, not as a fixed prison, but as a living invitation. When you remember the future that frees you, you become a ripple in the collective awakening. And somewhere, because you chose differently, another soul will feel brave enough to turn toward the light too. So now you understand why that strange memory from tomorrow was never here to confuse you. It was not a mistake in your brain. It was not a meaningless glitch in time. It was a signal, a ripple, a quiet invitation asking the observer inside you to finally wake up. You learned that the brain does not only reach backward into the past, sometimes it trembles before a future that has not arrived yet. Because consciousness is wider than linear time. It touches possibility before the physical world has built the evidence. It feels the echo before the event appears. But the deeper truth is this: not every future you feel is fixed. Some futures are warnings. Some are invitations. Some are old timelines asking whether you will feed them again. And some are higher possibilities calling you into a version of yourself that has already begun remembering freedom now. This is why the observer effect is not merely an idea to understand. It is a responsibility to embody. Your attention is a quantum spotlight. Your emotion gives weight to what you observe. Your identity decides whether a signal becomes a prison, a lesson, or a doorway into awakening today. If you have been feeding the old future with fear, you do not need to hate yourself. You only need to become conscious. The old self was trying to protect you, but protection becomes a cage when it keeps choosing the same pain and calling that pain destiny again today. You are allowed to withdraw your light. You are allowed to stop rehearsing the outcome that shrinks you. You are allowed to feel a future memory without surrendering your body to it. Recognition is not obedience. Familiarity is not fate. The old timeline can knock without entering your field anymore. And the higher timeline does not demand panic. It does not need you to force, chase, prove, or beg. It calls through coherence. It calls through peace. It calls through the quiet certainty that says, I can become available to the future that frees me. One breath at a time. So take that breath now. Not as a performance, but as a return. Feel the part of you that has been scanning for danger soften its grip. Feel the observer step out of the loop. Feel tomorrow losing its old command over your nervous system and your sacred choices now. You are not here to predict every detail of what comes next. You are here to choose which future deserves your attention. You are here to stop giving creative power to the image that frightens you. You are here to become coherent with the life your soul recognizes already within. The shift may begin quietly. A thought loses authority. A pattern feels less magnetic. A reaction pauses before it completes itself. A dream no longer scares you. A sign no longer makes you chase. These are not small things. These are the first movements of a liberated timeline inside you. From this moment, let the declaration become simple. I no longer remember the future that limits me. I now observe the future that frees me. Say it slowly. Let every word move through your chest, your breath, your spine, and the hidden places where fear once made agreements inside you. If this message reached something in you, do not let it remain only a feeling. Anchor it, write it, speak it. Live one small action from it today. Comment the declaration. My future is free now. Not to impress anyone, but to mark the moment your observer chose again consciously. Because when you write those words, you are not merely leaving a comment. You are placing a signal in the field. You are telling the old timeline that it no longer has full access to your attention. You are telling the higher future, I can see you now clearly today, and once you see it, you cannot fully return to sleep. The memory from tomorrow has done its work. It has shown you where the old observer was hiding, and where the awakened observer begins. Your future is responsive. Your shift is alive. Your freedom is already listening right now.